In this last video, I'm going to go over with you how you would write out your results from a t-test if you were writing for publication. So whenever we present our statistics to the world, there's a certain format that we use to communicate our results. Let's take a look. So I'm going to give you a study scenario first. If you will recall, we had a data set from previous weeks where we looked at post-coping skills in a group of people. So we looked at post-coping skills, and I think it was after they had undergone some sort of a treatment. But the t-test that I'm interested in doing is trying to figure out if post-coping skills vary according to gender. In other words, I'm interested if post-coping skills are different for males and females in this study. And so I can set up an independent samples t-test to check this. My independent variable is going to be gender. That's the two groups, the sort of the manipulation. I have air quotes around manipulation. I'm putting people into two different groups. I'm designating two different groups. I'm doing that manipulation as a researcher. And the dependent variable is how they score on this post-coping measure. So if there is no difference, we would have a T of 0. But I'm looking at the post-coping T score, and it's a T of 0.71. So there is some sort of a difference that's going on here between these two groups, but what I don't know is if it is a significant difference. I don't know if it's really meaningful, and I need to look at the p-value to figure that out. Before I get there, though, I'm going to look at the degrees of freedom, and it's 78, so that just means that all told, there were 80 people in this study. The groups may or may not have been equal. But you take n minus 2 for the degrees of freedom in an independent samples t-test. The p-value that was obtained is 0.48. I'm rounding it to 0.48. Now, I know that that is so much more than 0.05. I can't reject the null because we can only reject the null hypothesis and say that something is statistically significant when the p is less than 0.05. So in this case, I failed to reject the null hypothesis. Cohen's d is given here, but because I have failed to reject the null, it's not statistically significant. I don't really care about Cohen's d. I'm not even going to think about it. How about that? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to describe the study in my write-up. I have to let the reader know what basically was the study about. And so I just offer you this sentence in red. A study was conducted to determine if coping skills differ by gender. Just a very quick and dirty, this is what it is. For step number 2, you're going to include the statistics. This is the tricky part because there are certain elements that need to be reported in a certain way. So let's look first at the T. We're going to put the lowercase letter t in italics to indicate that this was a t-test that I conducted. And then right after the t, I'm going to put my degrees of freedom. I need to put those degrees of freedom there so that the reader knows approximately how many people were in this study. And so degrees of freedom are listed in parentheses, but not italics. Following these two pieces is the actual t-value, an equal sign, and then the t-value of 0.71. You'll notice that I didn't put 0.712. I'm going to put it at 2 decimal places, 0.71. And then there's a comma, which is required. And then you have a P that's also italicized with a period. That's for your p-value. And then equals, and then you put your p-value. Again, this is also to 2 decimal places. So I know that this is a lot of specific detail, but let's just review. T needs to be there, lowercase italics, degrees of freedom in parentheses, an equal sign, the actual t value to 2 decimal places, 0.71, a comma, the letter P italicized with a period, and then an equal sign of 0.48 for the actual p-value. All right, there you go. That was the hardest part. The next part is you need to make a decision. So in this case, if you will remember, we failed to reject the null hypothesis. We can't find statistical significance in this case. And then the last thing you do is you explain it in your own words. There is no significant difference in coping skills by gender. So you're kind of giving a little bit more detail and context. So this is what it looks like when it's all written up in paragraph form. So we don't write up our results as bullets. We write them as a paragraphs, as if we're writing a novel, a very boring novel maybe, but a novel. So a study was conducted to determine if coping skills differ by gender, and then you give the statistics. We failed to reject the null hypothesis. There is no significant difference in coping skills by gender. That's it. So I said, I made a joke about a novel. This is not creative writing. In fact, when I write up my research results, I very often kind of just use a template in terms of what words I'm going to use. I'm not doing creative writing here. It's the goal of this is to be as specific and clear as possible. When you're writing up your research results for publication, later on in the discussion section, you can wax poetic or whatever, but you're not doing that here. This is just the facts, man. Okay, I'm going to give you another example. This is an independent samples t-test. Again, I'm using gender just because it was easy and it was a data set we'd already used before. There was some data set where we looked at points in class and do they differ by gender. Now, when I say do they differ by gender, I'm positing a two-tailed test. I'm not saying are males higher than females, are females higher than males. I'm not. I'm just asking if there's a difference. This is an independent samples t-test looking for a difference in points by males and females. So if we look at the results, the t gave us a t of 4.256 or 4.26. I already know that that's pretty high. When I think about the t's that we've been looking at and which ones are significant, of course that's going to depend on the degrees of freedom to a certain extent. Our degrees of freedom in this study were 106. So how many does that mean were in the study? Yes, 108. So the p-value does not disappoint. So when we have a p-value that's less than 0.01, we don't report the actual p-value to all the decimals. We just say it's less than 0.01, or in this case, less than 0.001. There is a 1 in 1,000 chance of obtaining our t statistic if the null hypothesis is true. Meaning, if it's true, what we have found in our sample is very, very strange. So our p-value is less than 0.001, and our Cohen's d, yes, we're now going to look at this, is 0.821. Now we care about it, don't we? So step 1, describe the study. I'm going to say that a study was conducted to determine if the number of points earned in this class differs by gender. That's just that statement that talks about the class. The next step is to talk about the statistics. Again, this is the most complex part. So as you can see, we have the t, which is italicized, the degrees of freedom in parentheses, an equal sign, and the actual t value. We put it at 2 decimal places, 4.26. And in this case, we're not reporting an exact p-value because we don't have it. We just know that the p is less than 0.001. But this time is a little different. We're going to also include our Cohen's d, showing that d equals 0.82. That is including the effect size in our results because it was statistically significant. Step 3, we're going to make a decision, and in this case, we reject the null hypothesis. We reject the idea that there's no difference. We say that there is a difference. We're not saying which one is higher, which one is lower, mind you. We're just saying that there's a difference because this is a two-tailed test. And the number of points earned in class differs by gender. That's the last thing we're going to explain. So if we were to write up this study, we would say a study was conducted to determine if the number of points earned in class differs by gender. And there are the statistics. We reject the null hypothesis. The number of points earned in class differs by gender. So that is, in a nutshell, how you would write up the results in paragraph form. And now when you do your assignment, you're going to have sort of 4 different questions that ask you to select the correct response. And in the final question, it's an essay question. You're going to write it all out as a paragraph. Now, this is a little different from other assignments. The other assignments so far, you've gotten your immediate feedback in terms of the number of points you've earned. But I have to go through and hand score the paragraph that you're going to write. So just be patient with me on that. You'll get your final scores very soon. And as always, please contact me if you have any questions or bring them to the Hallway Conversations Forum. Good luck.